section where we're going to be talking about global investment in football from the West to the rest. I think it's going to be quite an interesting conversation that we're going to have this morning. Just going to do a few brief introductions and then we'll get going talking about investment in football and particularly concentrating a little bit on investment in European football. My name is Simon Howard. From Deloitte, I lead our sports business group in Europe, so working with lots of different investors coming into Europe, particularly in Spain, as I'm based in Madrid, and also working with many football clubs across Europe in their internationalisation strategies and looking for investment. We've got a great panel here this morning. We've got Javier Sobrino from Aser Ventures, managing partner there and also formerly responsible for corporate strategy in Barcelona. Jordan Gardner from US investor, has invested in Danish football FC Helsingor, and that'll be interesting to get some insights of that experience. And the obviously very well known José María Cruz, President CEO of Sevilla here, and muchas gracias por recibirnos en vuestra ciudad, José María. So let's get going, and maybe starting with you, Jordan. Coming into Europe and coming into Danish football, fairly small league, but we're seeing lots of investors, particularly from the US, North America, coming to Europe. What's the main attraction for all of these investors, and then maybe developing that a little bit into your case?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of macro trends over the last couple of years. You know, we were in Denmark since 2019, and I think, you know, the price points to get into sports and investment in sports in North America are getting incredibly exorbitant. You know, MLS franchises now are being valued on average at $400 to $500 million. You have other major American sports, you know, obviously significantly higher than that. So I think you look at Europe and European football and you can say, look, we can get into certainly smaller leagues for much lower price points. You can get clubs promoted. You can create business models that actually make financial sense. And I think there's other areas. You know, more recently, you're looking at the strength of the US dollar right now versus the pound and versus the euro, saying, look, there's a huge opportunity right now to capitalize on that by putting money into European sports. So there's a lot of different reasons. For us, and for me personally, the concept was, you know, we wanted to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that particularly American groups had made in European football, coming in without a respect or real understanding of how to run these clubs well. And so for me, it was about finding a bit of a smaller club in a smaller country where we could learn on the fly, make mistakes, you know, kind of show proof of concept like you would in any other business. And, you know, fortunately, I think we did that, getting a club promoted and really having a lot of success over a period of time. And then we can talk about scaling. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit further about multi-club, which is something that everyone's talking about right now. And, you know, for me personally, it's about running one club well and efficiently, which is incredibly difficult, as I'm sure everyone on this stage knows. Then you can scale upwards and talking about more clubs or bigger clubs and whatnot. So for us, and for me, it's just about being very smart and strategic about the way I look at investing in European sports.
Right, and Javier, developing that in your experience, obviously you've got a lot of experience of Barcelona, but then you've also got the experience of investment and in Leeds in the UK. Is the UK league or the English league overpriced? And you know, Jordan was talking about going to a smaller league, but what's your kind of feeling about investing in the EPL or looking at other European leagues?
No, absolutely. Investing in EPL right now, it's very, very expensive. I think some of the prices that we are seeing during last weeks, months, the Chelsea case and others that we are seeing. So probably a Premier League is right now very, very expensive. It's also a question that, for me, Premier League is, I will compare it with NBA, and probably they are the two kind of competitions where those brands are so strong that owners are willing or are even, they can afford to overpay. And this is something that we are seeing. The point is that to what extent, what are the returns of that investment? The point is that some of those investors, as Jordan was mentioning, which was a very good point, is you have to analyze what's the reason why you're investing. And some of them, they are not investing just for financial return. They're investing for other reasons. And probably being in Premier League, that's one of the key reasons why they are probably to be in a very closed club rather than just purely looking for a short-run investment. From our perspective, we invested the group invested in Leeds a while ago. we definitely bought a club in second division, and we were able to properly managing the club to promote it. And now our key challenge is to consolidate it in Premier League. And it was a different kind of approach for those that we are seeing right now, just investing in Premier League. So definitely investing in Premier League right now, it's getting very tough.
Right, and we'll develop that a little bit further and come on to kind of your point, Jordan, a little bit on multi-clubs. But before doing that, it'd probably be interesting, Jose Maria, just to think about on the other side of the table a little bit from Sevilla's point of view. You've had lots of international investors coming in and having a look at Sevilla, and there's been investment. But from a club's point of view, what is Sevilla's kind of strategy? We had Monchi yesterday, fantastic insights into the kind of the recruitment and how Sevilla is run. But how do you look at kind of your internationalization strategy, and what's your perspective of investors coming to Spain and Sevilla?
Well, to be honest, for me, it was some years ago a surprise that US investors or other foreign investors were interested in acquiring European football clubs. I have been working in football during the last 20 years, and if I go back with my mind to the past when my father was 30, 40 years ago a member of the board of directors of Sevilla FC, and I think I see now the present, and it is incredible how European football, and especially Spanish football, has been interesting for foreign investors, because I always say that football is a good business, but it's a very strange business. It's not easy to be successful. It's not easy to obtain gains by investing in football. But I have seen during the last few years that more and more the clubs are more professional. Clubs can be maybe profitable if they follow the proper strategy, if they are not focused in trying to be very quick, to be very quickly successful in the sporting area, and they treat the club as a company, as an investment, as a business, and not only as a football club. Of course, passion is paramount in football, but you need to separate what is the business and which is the passion. We have Sevilla FC in the center of many interests in the recent past of foreign investors, whether from US or from other countries. In fact, we have a minority shareholder which owns 7-8% of the share capital. Probably their strategy was a little bit different than the strategy of other US investors. And I believe that it is good in general for football, that is attractive. If European football clubs are attractive for investors. The point is how to find a balance between the interest of the supporters, the interest of the fans, the interest of the cities, and the interest of the investors, which in some cases is easy to put together. In other cases, it's not easy, because in Spain, especially, supporters are not very favorable to investors, because they believe that they want to obtain only money. They are not interested in the history. They are not interested in the city. They are not interested in having a long-term project in order to have better infrastructures and other kind of skills for the club. And it is something that only the future will show if it is good or bad for the clubs. It is very difficult when you start conversations with an investor who is interested in your club to see if he will be good for the club or not. Only the future will, when the future comes, you will see if it has been good for the club or not. Sevilla FC is in a different way. We have investors, we have owners that are from Seville, that they have been working with Sevilla for many, many years. We have 4 or 5 families which owns most of the capital of the clubs. And we are more interested, instead of receiving investment from abroad, we are interested in investing abroad, having the possibility to incorporate to our structure of football some minority shareholding in other clubs in Europe or in other countries. We have been analyzing very recently the possibility to acquire a club in the US, but at the end we decided not to do in this moment, especially because of the crisis of the COVID and the international situation. But we are open to analyze the possibility to acquire clubs outside, especially in some countries of Europe. And we are, on the other hand, starting our strategy of internationalization. We have recently signed an agreement with an Indian club, with a small club that is supported by a very interesting family. And we believe that our short-term strategy in terms of internationalization will be in the way of our World Alliance program, to have consistent agreements with clubs from other countries in order to share experience, share technology, and to grow together.
So that's really interesting. Thank you, Jose Maria. And just picking up on a couple of those points, Jordan, particularly the understanding of the culture of football in, whether it was in, obviously, your case, Sevilla, and in your case, in Denmark, not just when you were investing, do you think US investors in general, are they coming in and understanding the local culture and what the fans want, what the city wants? And in your experience, were you able to kind of reconcile that with the local town and people?
Look, I think I've always been pretty honest and transparent. A lot of American groups aren't sensitive to the local cultures. They kind of come in with an American sports mindset of saying, hey, I've owned or I've run a club in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. That's going to translate to European football. And I think what many people underestimate is the just intricacies of European football, everything from relegation to the player sales piece of the business to the passion piece. So, to Jose Maria's point, I think my personal philosophy is that you should not go into European football as a foreign investor just to make money. There are better ways to put your money in the world, right? Whether it's the stock market or private equity or venture. These clubs need to be run like businesses. They need to be run efficiently. But you have to understand that something that as an investor or a CEO or a director in these clubs, you have to have a passion for it. I genuinely was passionate about our club in Denmark. I'm passionate about Danish football. I watch all the games on television at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't care, right? So I think you have to find this balance, which I think a lot of American groups have a difficult time doing. I think you look at what's going on with Chelsea and Todd Bowley, and I think you can see that he's kind of on the fly learning what to do and what not to do maybe, and he's going to figure it out. He'll eventually figure it out. They're smart guys. They've had a lot of success and proof of concept with the Dodgers. But I think the good news for what we did in Denmark is we learned, and I learned on the fly, and I definitely made mistakes. I probably said some stupid stuff in the local media, but we were in a small country in a small market, and fortunately, no one saw it, and I was able to learn and say, okay, I'm probably not going to do that again. And now looking at European football 3.5 years later, I can say, yes, I still have a very business-savvy American mindset when it comes to running these clubs, but I'm also very sensitive to the fact that European football is different, and I need to look at it in a more European way. So I think that experience being on the ground, very few Americans have that. So if you're an American ownership group coming into whatever club, Bournemouth, right, there's rumors, if you're not going to have that experience as the owner, the leaders of the club, you need to hire people that have that experience. And we'll see what that trend looks like, but as of now, it's kind of hit or miss.
All right, so Javier, I saw you nodding to a lot of what Jordan was saying. How do we reconcile, and there's a lot of competition for investing, right? And we have some investors that are looking to make money, other investors it's just more their trophy asset. And we also need to make sure that whether we try and make money or not, that the clubs are run properly. And the operation side is difficult. How do you reconcile all of that in trying to run a club properly, but also get the right level of investment?
That's probably the key point in investment in Europe in football. And actually, yesterday we had a workshop here in World Football Summit, and we were talking about this precisely. And the point was, that's really, really difficult. Because at the end of the day, regulations are completely different in different countries. Motivations of the owners are completely different as well. So from a purely investor perspective, that's absolutely, absolutely difficult, and something that should be done, because at the end, there is no way to reconcile all those interests. And also to Jose Maria's point, what is the role of the fund in all this scheme? It's not easy as well. because we are seeing that at some stages, people are saying that the fund, they have to be, and they should be in the center of the club, but what does it mean? Because from an investment perspective, obviously your funds are sometimes are your partners, but mainly should be your clients as well. So how you interact with that and how you manage that trade-off. So it's definitely very, very difficult issue. And then you have the members club, which I have the experience as well, and that's a completely different scheme. In my very personal view, not that sustainable in the long run. But so at the end of the day, what you have to do is to try to define different types of schemes that are sustainable in the long run, because we should not forget, and here we are in a forum in the industry, the key element in the industry right now is financial sustainability. And if you revise all the P&Ls of the key clubs in Europe, not that many are able to make money. And I'm not saying that the key goal of a club is to make money, but the key goal of a club, and this is something that we all can agree, is to be financially sustainable in order to do different things. Ones that will satisfy the members, others will satisfy the investor, others will satisfy whoever stakeholder is the key one for any of them. But if we, as an industry, we are not financially sustainable, we have a big issue. And actually, right now, we are not financially sustainable. I mean, as a whole industry. Because you can, and there are many reports that show this, how income has grown. If we leave aside COVID, the consistent growth of income during last years, and there are great examples of big clubs that they are growing their revenues. And what is the growth in profits? None. Even most of them, they are suffering.
I think it's what we talked about earlier a little bit, is no one buys a football club to make the difficult decisions, right? Which is cut costs, or if you have to fire employees, or make difficult decisions. And to your point, revenues are rising across European football, but so are expenses. And unfortunately, that doesn't work. But, clubs get to the Premier League, they get to La Liga, and they take all that extra TV money and they just spend it on players, and they spend it wastefully, right? Which is unfortunate.
But then maybe Sevilla is a good example of doing it quite well, right? And thinking about financial sustainability. So your player trading has been very successful from a financial point of view over the years by having the right people in place. But can you, on the one hand, be sustainable financially, but on the other hand also compete with Real Madrid and Barcelona? And obviously Barcelona's got a few issues at the moment, but do you feel as though you can actually compete with Barcelona and Real Madrid in La Liga?
Not. No, you can compete sometimes. It is possible that you are in a period of, say, 10 years, you can be efficient some year, 2 years, and you have the possibility to compete with them. The problem sometimes is when you have been success, as we have been in the past in the sporting aspect. We have won many trophies in the past, especially in Europe, and we have been very profitable in the past before the COVID. And I'm proud of having supported the policy of paying dividend to the shareholders. I don't know which is the experience in other countries, but especially in Spain, probably Sevilla FC has been the only club paying dividend to the shareholders 3 consecutive years. And for me, it has been very, very important because, sometimes you feel that you must spend all the money in football players. You have to pay to them and to the agents everything. And you forgot to the shareholders, which are also relevant. The problem is when you believe that you are able to compete at a top level consistently, and you invest more and more money in acquiring players because you have the illusion of being more competitive, and you forget your size, you forget your structure, and you start spending more money than you earn. Football, especially in Spain, in the first and in the second division, is able to be not only sustainable, but also profitable. if you are able to analyze your possibilities and to see which is your limit. If you believe that you can spend more money in order to pass from one level to other and to be consistently in this high level, you are probably starting to be in a mistake, because you need to analyze which your possibilities are. Sometimes your maximum level is to be able to compete consistently in European competitions. Sometimes it's only to stay in the first division, not to be relegated to the second division. You must analyze which are your possibilities and trying to be consistent in a long-term period. Some clubs, we have some example in Spain, Deportivo many years ago, Valencia most recently, they thought that they were able to compete consistently every year with Real Madrid and Barcelona, but it's not possible because the budget of Valencia, for an example, was 200 million euro, less than Barcelona and Real Madrid were close to 1,000 million euro. It's not possible to compete. You must be more efficient and to accept that sometimes you will be able to compete, sometimes, some years you will be unable, but you must be self-sustainable because if not, it will be a disaster. We have been very successful in Spain and before the COVID at the European level. We passed before the financial fair play for being in losses, most of the European clubs, to pass to be profitable, most of the European clubs. We need to go back to this situation because if not, we will be in a trouble.
Right, and I totally agree. And the whole point of dividends is quite tricky, right, from an investor's point of view, because when we work with various investors and that don't necessarily understand the complexities of football, and they come along with their discounted cash flow and the dividend payments going out every year, so well, you can't really do that in football because you have to reinvest the money that you do generate into players and improving the value of the club. But you made an interesting point, Jordan, is that you've got to invest in the right players because a lot of clubs kind of waste that money by the wrong strategy. So from an investor's point of view, and then thinking about exit as well, how do you think about making a return on your investment? Because you're not necessarily going to be able to take those dividends out. Very few clubs have successfully paid dividends. I appreciate Sevilla's been able to do that. You look at the case of Manchester United where they take dividends out and the Glazers get all sorts of terrible publicity. So how do you actually make a return on your investment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the challenge is a lot of investment groups don't even really think about it realistically, as you said. I think exiting is really the way that you can actually make a profit in this business. It doesn't always happen that way. I think the challenge you have is, very few people in this industry are very forward thinking in terms of thinking a year, 2 years, 3 years ahead. So for instance, if I had a club in Segunda maybe, or the championship, and I did everything right and was running the club efficiently and got it promoted, well, maybe that would be a time for me to think about exiting quickly, right? Because all of a sudden my asset went from here to here. I think very few people think of that. They kind of get caught up in the emotion and the passion of we just got it promoted, and as Jose Maria said, maybe we'll go for Europe now, maybe we'll be in the Champions League, right? So you got to sit back and take a step back and say who we are as a club. We took the club from the bottom of the second division up to the first division, whatever league that is, and this is our opportunity to turn this into a real return for our investors. Dividends for most clubs are not realistic. So I think that's the piece. But in terms of selling a club, exiting, that's something you have to do 6 to 12 months going backwards in terms of how long it takes for the new buyers to do due diligence and make sure there's a right process in place. Many leagues have owners and directors tests. So the issue is, even if you get promoted and you decide the next day you want to sell, you're unlikely to be able to sell in any short period of time. So maybe it takes you 3 to 6 months to sell the club, and all of a sudden you're in a relegation zone. So now your club isn't worth nearly what it was. So the point being, you always have to be very forward thinking in this industry, especially if you're trying to run it like a business and you don't have unlimited funds and unlimited amounts of cash to burn. But I think that's the way groups are starting to think about it.
And do you think there are, in your experience, are there plenty of investors to take on that, to sell? We've had so many coming in the past, Middle East, China, local investors, American investors. When you get to that point and decide, yes, we're going to sell because we've got promoted twice and now is a good time to give a return to your shareholders, are there plenty of other investors there to sell to?
I think yes, if we're talking about the Premier League, La Liga, I think there's always going to be interest in those clubs. The question is, are the valuations realistic? Right? Can it be done in a quick period of time? But yes, I mean, you look again, not to use Bournemouth as an example, but the fact that there's serious interest for a club like Bournemouth, which is a great club, but doesn't have amazing infrastructure, I think just goes to show the strength of the Premier League in terms of those type of clubs. La Liga is the same thing. Yes, there's strong demand for that. All right.
And then, Javier, you mentioned before that the member system of ownership is not sustainable going forward. For those, we've got two very big examples in Real Madrid and Barcelona here, and they've managed to create some different ways of raising investment over the last few months, whether it's siphoning off the revenues from the stadium, and Barca's done quite a few interesting things. But in the long term, do you think that ownership structure will change and that there will be an opportunity for investors to come and buy stakes in the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona?
I think so, and probably, obviously, this would be a question to managers of Real Madrid or Barcelona, but my very personal opinion is that, and I'm very sensitive about ownership of Real Madrid and Barcelona, but I think they can, in the long run, they can find mixed schemes where members, they have a word, and I think Bayern Munich is a great example of that, where they are kind of have a structural foundation that they keep, to a certain extent, certain decisions, certain type of ownership. But at the end of the day, if they want to compete in the big leagues as they do, as they have done so far, they need to bring investors on board. And actually, both of them are doing it in different ways. Right. So Real Madrid has brought 6th Street and Legends in order to operate Bernabeu. They brought Relevant before. Now FC Barcelona with Goldman Sachs is a street. So they are doing all of that because they need those resources in order to compete. So yeah, I think this is something that this model will change. I'm not saying that members are not relevant anymore, which definitely they are, but this system has to change. But if you allow me another, and coming back to Jordan's point as well, is you were mentioning about returns on investment. I fully agree with Jordan on kind of being smart enough in order to detect a club that is underperforming from management perspective and obviously from sports perspective, and being able to grow that club. And this means that you should create a long-term strategy. But I think there is another way to leverage the investment in football, which is using the club or the structure of clubs, if you have different clubs. But if you have a club as an ecosystem for innovation and investing in companies related to sport. And this is very well related with what we did at Barça Innovation Hub back in 2017. This is very well related to what we do at Aser, which is we run leads together with other investors, but surrounding leads and surrounding Barça Innovation Hub and other initiatives that are right now in the market, you are in a privileged position in order to detect other types of investments that are sports related or sports, entertainment, healthcare related, but they are not sport properties. So you have much more flexibility on other investments. You are in a privileged position in order to leverage those investments, and obviously as a financial investor, look for return in those investments, create that ecosystem, create that the club acting as a lab, as a living lab in order to test technologies, in order to develop technologies, and then your flexibility there will be much higher.
Right, no, totally agree. Maybe we can just relate that back, Jose Maria, to you mentioned briefly, but maybe just talk a little bit more in detail of India and looking for ways of expanding or generating other revenues. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience or Seville's experience with India?
Well, it's a very long-term project. We must be very patient with India. Why we have thought that India may be a good opportunity for us in the future? First of all, we thought that we needed to go to a big market with many young people. I don't remember exactly the average age of people in India, but maybe 20 years or something similar. And people who are more and more interested in football. Football is not the first sport in India, it's cricket. Yep. I don't know if it is the second or the third. There are some other kind of games which are not a sport, but are very popular at the level of TV as well. And the most important thing for us was to find the proper partner. We were not interested in starting with a team of the professional I-League. What was important for us was to find the proper partner. And we found the proper partner. They were interested in growing slowly, not quickly, investing in infrastructure. And for us, it was not only the football, but it was also something that Javier has mentioned and which is very interesting for us. Our interest was to put together football and technology. For this reason, we were not interested in Delhi or in Mumbai or in Calcutta. We were interested in Bengaluru because it's the city in India where technology is very, very important. It is the city where Infosys started. And some of our partners have been in the past very close to Infosys. We were interested in joining football and technology, and we try, not at the level of FC Barcelona, but our own level to create this kind of ecosystem, putting together football and technology. In fact, Sevilla has been able to create some platform of artificial intelligence, not only to be used by Sevilla FC, but also to be shared as a business model with other teams. We are very close to finish an agreement with La Liga in order to develop a platform that has been created by the data analyst of Sevilla FC. And we want to be more and more used as a test for different technology companies in order to create models, platforms, apps which are useful for the football industry. I'm especially concerned about a problem that we have in football, the injuries. The money that football clubs lose when football players are injured. And it represents thousands of millions per year. And if we are able to reduce the time in which the players are injured from 2 months to 1 month, right, it represents a considerable amount of money. Then we want to cooperate with other clubs, with leagues, and with companies specialized in technology in order to solve the problems of the industry. I believe that this is the future, and this is one of the reasons that Sevilla has decided to operate, I hope that in a short term, with an office, a delegation in India, in order to put together football and technology.
Right. So again, very interesting and excellent strategy. And just thinking about, we've talked a lot about generating additional revenues. We've talked about how the cost basis continues to go up as well. And you mentioned it earlier, Jordan, the kind of multi-club, and Javier, you mentioned getting revenues from other sports or other areas. Despite living in Madrid, I'm a season ticket holder at Liverpool, and when FSG first came in, there was a lot of talk about how revenues from Liverpool will be siphoned off to the Red Sox, and I'm sure in Boston they probably thought the same. But the trend now is, and there's a lot it's in the press every day, right, is this multi-club kind of model. Red Bull, Citigroup, they've started to do this. And we had a little bit of a chat before. It's not quite straightforward, right? But Javier, do you think this is what we're going to see more and more of in European football and world football, that we'll have these kind of mega groups building clubs up? And how will that develop, and how will the fans react to that? It's fine if you have a kind of a hierarchy of big club, medium club, small club, but it's going to get complicated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not easy. Probably the smartest way to do it is to invest in different markets that have no relationship whatsoever among them. And actually, there are some markets right now that are becoming very attractive, like Brazil, for instance, and all the efforts that CBF and the new project with La Liga in Brazil. I think that the value of those clubs are going to be increased. this is not a kind of a right or wrong answer. It's a question of what is the purpose of the owner in order to invest in those type of properties. I think it does make sense to have a football network of clubs if you are able to exploit those synergies the right way. And this is, and you can write this in a PowerPoint presentation, and everybody does it. But the point is, what are those synergies, and what is the value that you create instead of investing in just one club, as Jordan was mentioning before, just one club and trying to create value in that club. I think there are opportunities, definitely. And it's not only a question of players transfer or be in a privileged position in order to transfer those players or bring those players from one market to another, which definitely can create value. I think that's more in the sense of, and coming back to the previous point on innovation and technology, if you are able to run a network of clubs and you are able to implement those technologies and use players and all the assets of those clubs as the key elements in order to test, in order to use those resources as a living lab, that can create a lot of value. And this is a trend that I think it's going to be consolidated in the market. And instead of financial investors kind of testing those companies where they invest and start knocking at the doors of different clubs, if you already have a network and you can test those technologies in those clubs and you can build up and contribute to those companies to grow, I think that's a really good idea.
What's your point of view, Jordan, as you've already gone through investing in a smallish market?
Yeah.
Do you see kind of the way forward as having these mega multi-club with all the challenges that Javier's mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking at an event, a FIFA event in New York City last week, and that was the talk of every owner and every club was how we're going to buy more clubs, we're going to create these synergies. And I think it's the future, yes. And I think the savvy operators, certainly obviously City Football Group and Red Bull have shown proof of concept, are going to have a lot of success. But I do think there's a lot of groups out there, certainly from my perspective, American groups as well, that are very just deal obsessed and they're just buying clubs to buy clubs, and there's not a lot of cohesive strategy in terms of understanding how the puzzle pieces fit together. I think as Javier said, there's opportunities to go into emerging markets. I think obviously everyone's talking about Brazil, but Mexico, Colombia, Asia, I think there's a ton of opportunity there, but all of a sudden, you go from 1 club to 3 to 5 clubs, you're running a multinational company. And if you don't scale up the holding company level infrastructure, the execution and the operation piece of the puzzle, both from a football side and a business side, you're not going to have success. And what you're going to do is you're going to lose a lot of money. And I think that's obviously problematic. So I think it sounds great on a piece of paper, but operationally, I think where it can become very challenging. It's very easy to say we're going to replicate City Football Group, but I think very few people understand the kind of infrastructure and the money being spent behind the scenes from a City Football Group to execute what they've done. So I'm hopeful that more sophisticated investors are going to understand what it takes to have success in this space.
And just thinking as City as an example, part of their remit is to make feeder clubs almost, and we heard from Dundee United yesterday with being a feeder club or selling players on to other areas and making money out of it. Do you think if we end up with this multi-club kind of scenario where we've got one mega club at the top and a number of feeder clubs, that's going to create all sorts of other problems, not just on the operational and financial side, but the relationship between those clubs, the fan relationship? Will fans accept the fact that they are a small club providing players to the owners in the bigger club?
I think it's a really good question. I think a lot of I was talking to one of the clubs in Brazil that got bought by a multi-club group, and he said the fans are very upset about becoming a feeder club. And I think, look, the bottom line is most clubs in the world are feeder clubs, right? That's just how football works, right? Either you're selling or moving a player within your network or selling it to someone else, unless you're, Real Madrid or one of the top clubs, right? So I think it's about the narrative and making sure that your fans understand how and why you are moving the players and what you're doing, being very, communication, that's always key. And I think, not to harp on it, but I think this is a problem some Americans have in Europe, is just explaining and understanding why we're doing something. We are going to move our 2 players from our club in Brazil to our club in Belgium. This is why we're doing it, then we're bringing in the next batch of players. It's no different than if we sold those 2 players to another group outside. But I think groups don't necessarily communicate well, and then it just looks like there's players moving all over the place. It can be difficult to do that, but I think there is a path forward to have a way that your supporters understand what you're trying to do and are accepting of that.
And from a Spanish point of view, Jose Maria, can you see a scenario where Sevilla or other clubs in La Liga form part of a mega organisation in the future? Maybe not just talking about Sevilla, but just in general. Can you see Spanish clubs being part of these groups where there's a feeder club in Brazil or Mexico and then relationships with Asia? Do you see in 5, 10 or even less than that? Can you see that scenario playing out?
Yes, I believe that is a future strategy that many clubs will follow, probably. UK clubs have started this strategy, and I'm sure that in the near future some Spanish club will follow the same view. To be honest, from the perspective of Sevilla FC, I would like to have the possibility to have a multi-club structure investing in other clubs, but I believe that we will follow a different approach. Instead of having participation, whether majority or minority in other clubs, we will probably follow the strategy of create a community of multi-clubs. Instead of having participation in the capital or in the management, we prefer to create a community of clubs, not many clubs, but say 4 or 5 clubs in different countries in which we can create this community of fans. It is not essential for us the movement of players from one country to the other. It is a possibility, but it's not our main intention. Our intention is to create a community in which we are able to share data, knowledge, technology, the interest of the fans and these kind of things. We are trying to do this. We have started with our partnership in India, and we hope that in the next 2-3 years we will be able to have the same scheme in 4 or 5 countries.
I think what's interesting to that is City Football Group has a club in Bolivia that they actually don't own, that they have a joint venture with the ownership group with Marcelo Clare. And so that's another way. There's different ways. It's not just we're going to buy 8 clubs and we're going to majority own them. There's different ways you can create partnerships, relationships, strategically. I think to see how that looks with, I think it's Club Bolivar, how that works in terms of their JV with the sharing of ideas and the movement of players when City doesn't own the club will be, I think, something interesting to see.
Yes, and one of the points is, our view at least, is that some of our sponsors are interested in some key markets. And if we are able to close agreements with football teams of these countries, it will be very good, not only for the club, but also for our sponsors.
Right. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Just kind of wrapping this up, there's a huge amount of cash coming into La Liga, the Premiership, Premier League, and various other leagues. Just very briefly, do we see that continuing, and is the investment that's going to come in over the next few years, are you going to continue to be principally from the US? You know, we've obviously seen the Middle East investing, you know, in a big way, but not quite so much the rest of AP, Asia Pacific. But is this investment going to continue over the next 3-5 years, and is it principally going to be people like you, Jordan?
Yes. I think you have the Ted Lasso effect, and you have now Welcome to Wrexham, which is Ryan Reynolds' club in Wales. I think besides all the other reasons in terms of the currency and the price points, I think it's the interest in European football has never been higher. The TV ratings for the Premier League, for La Liga, for major European leagues in the US are very high, and the interest in the amount of capital in the US is only going to grow in my mind.
And people don't mind getting up ridiculously early to watch it, right? Javier, is it going to continue? Is this trend of investment from North America going to continue, do you think?
No, I think so, yes, absolutely. Probably the point is whether there will be some European capital as well, even from corporate venturing. I think there are companies which interest in sport is massive, and all the disruptions that we're suffering in the sector, like D2C, are going to change the landscape, for instance, from the broadcasters. And probably it will be the right timing for broadcasters to start thinking on what will be next for them. And perhaps it's a question of them investing in not in properties, but in leagues, in order to start managing other way. So I think there are very, very interesting movements right now in the industry. We have witnessed those investments from the US, but I think other investors from other strategic perspectives are going to join the sector in the coming years.
And just briefly, Jose Maria, you see lots of investment continuing and lots of opportunities?
Yes. In the past, we have investors from Russia. We have investors in other years from China, from the Middle East, now is from US. Maybe that in the future there is a mix of investors from many different countries. Maybe that European investors will be also more and more interested in investing European clubs or clubs from other countries. But I believe that, yes, I believe that this is the future. And it is a good news for the football industry, because it means that football is only part of the entertainment business. We will see probably more and more in the future that clubs, football clubs, are part of groups which are also interested in other kind of entertainment, whether movies, whether games, or whether other kind of. And the challenge is future.
Right.
Future. It is very difficult to anticipate future, exactly. Looking at 10, 15 years.
Right.
The stadiums will be full or empty in the future. The value of the TV rights will be the same, will be great. There will be other kind of entertainment which will be more popular. This is the main challenge, but I am optimistic.
Well, we hope the stadiums continue to be full, and being in the Sanchez Pizjuan when it's full is a fantastic experience, right? So thank you very much, Jose Maria, Jordan, Javier. Fantastic insights, really interesting. So thank you very much for the panel.
Thanks to you, and thanks to World Football Summit for the invitation.
Thank you.